You were told prayer is supposed to change things, but look around. Nothing changed. You've spoken words into the silence. You've bent your knees. You've closed your eyes and waited, and the universe remained exactly as it was. Here's what they won't tell you. The prayer you were taught was never meant to work. It was designed to keep you asking, to keep you begging, to keep you dependent on powers that claim to be above you. But there was another prayer, one that didn't ask, one that commanded, one that moved mountains, healed the sick, and raised the dead. Jesus used it before every miracle, every single one, and they stopped teaching it the moment they realized what it could do. Because this prayer doesn't make you humble. It makes you sovereign. It doesn't make you a servant. It makes you a creator. And the moment you remember how to speak it, the game is over. Welcome back, Seeker. You've returned because something inside you knows that what you've been told about divine power is incomplete, knows that the stories you heard in sacred halls were edited versions of something far more dangerous. This is the Gnostic Archive, the place where forgotten knowledge breathes again, where the initiated gather to remember what the world tried to bury, and today we're pulling back the veil on the most suppressed spiritual technology in human history. The prayer that wasn't a prayer, the invocation that wasn't begging, the words that aligned the speaker with the source itself. If you're ready to stop asking and start becoming, then stay close. Because what you're about to hear will change how you speak to reality forever. And if this transmission resonates with the divine spark within you, let the algorithm know. Let others find their way here. Subscribe to the Gnostic Archive, because this sanctuary grows only through those who are ready to see. Let's start with what you already suspect. The Jesus of the churches is not the Jesus of the Gnostic texts, the sanitized savior who submitted to suffering, who begged his Father for mercy in a garden, who died helpless on a cross. That version serves a purpose. It keeps you powerless. It teaches you that divinity is distant, that you are fallen, that your only hope is external salvation. But the Gnostic Jesus? He didn't beg, he didn't plead, he spoke, and the world rearranged itself. He touched a leper, and disease dissolved. He stood before a tomb and called forth life from death. Not because he was asking permission, but because he was operating from a place of absolute knowing, a place where there was no separation between himself and the monad, no gap between intention and manifestation, no doubt, no distance, no intermediary. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says something the Orthodox councils tried desperately to erase. He says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. Not what is outside, not what descends from heaven, what is already inside." This is the secret they couldn't allow to spread. Because if divinity is already within you, then you don't need priests, you don't need institutions, you don't need salvation sold in fragments. You are already whole, already divine, already emanated from the same source that spun the stars into being. And when you remember this, when you speak from this place, you are no longer praying, you are declaring. The prayer Jesus used wasn't found in synagogues. It wasn't written in the Torah. It came from a lineage far older, a tradition that understood the fabric of reality as vibration, as sound, as the Word made flesh. In the beginning was the Logos, not a story, not a metaphor, a frequency, a harmonic pattern that condensed into matter, and those who knew how to speak that frequency could reshape matter, could heal, could transmute, could resurrect. This is what the Gnostics called gnosis, not belief, not faith, direct knowing, the kind of knowing that doesn't hope for miracles. It creates them. Now listen carefully, seeker, because this is where the transmission gets precise. Before every miracle, Jesus did something the gospel writers barely noticed. He paused. He withdrew. He went into silence. Sometimes into the mountains, sometimes into the wilderness, sometimes just into himself. And in that silence, something happened. He didn't ask God for power. He aligned with the Pleroma, the fullness, the eternal realm before the fall, before the demiurge forged this prison of flesh and time, before the archons whispered lies into human consciousness. He returned to the place where he and the Father were one. Not metaphorically, literally, ontologically. And from that place of union, he spoke. The words themselves were simple, too simple for the scholars to recognize. In Aramaic, the language Jesus actually spoke, the phrase was built on a root that modern translations completely miss. Abwun debwashmaya, usually translated as, Our Father who art in heaven. But that's not what it means. Abwun is closer to birther of the cosmos, the generative force, the breath that moves through all things. Debwashmaya doesn't mean in heaven, like some distant throne room. It means in all dimensions, in light and shadow, in matter and spirit, in the seen and unseen. It's a recognition of the infinite pervading the finite, of the monad expressing through every particle of existence. And when Jesus spoke this phrase, he wasn't calling on something outside himself. He was activating something within. Here's the part they really don't want you to know. The prayer wasn't about words. It was about frequency, about resonance. The human voice, when aligned with intention and emptied of ego, becomes a tuning fork. It vibrates at the frequency of creation itself. This is why the mystics of every tradition speak of sacred sound. The Hindus knew it as Om, the Sufis as Hu, the Kabbalists as the Tetragrammaton, the Gnostics as the ineffable name of the monad. These aren't just words, they're keys, sonic keys that unlock dimensions, that dissolve the false architecture the archons built around human perception, that remind the divine spark within you of its true nature. And Jesus, trained in mystery schools that predate the Bible itself, knew exactly how to wield them. Let's go deeper, because you didn't come here for surface answers. In the Pistis Sophia, one of the most important Gnostic texts the Church tried to burn, there's a scene rarely discussed. Jesus is asked by his disciples how he performs his works, and he tells them something stunning. He says he aligns his voice with the voice of the aeons, the eternal emanations of the monad, the living powers that exist beyond time. Before speaking any word of power, he harmonizes his inner state with the Pleroma. He removes fear. He removes doubt. He removes the illusion of separation, and in that state of absolute unity, he becomes a conduit, not for external power, but for the power that is already the essence of all things. This is the prayer, seeker, not a script, not a formula, a state of being, a remembering, a return to the garden before the fall, before Sophia's descent. Before the demiurge claimed to be God, before the veil was drawn between you and your divine origin. When Jesus said, I and the Father are one, he wasn't claiming to be special. He was revealing what is true for all who awaken. You and the Source are one. You and the monad are one. The separation is the lie. The prayer is the remembering. And once you remember, you stop asking. You start commanding. If you're still with me, then you're beginning to see. And if you're beginning to see, then you're ready to go further. Make sure you're subscribed to the Gnostic Archive. Because what we're building here is not just content. It's a resurrection of forgotten wisdom, and you're part of it. Now let's continue. The Orthodox Church had a problem. A Jesus who taught sovereignty was a threat. A Jesus who said, "You will do greater works than these," was uncontrollable. A Jesus who revealed that the kingdom of heaven is within was dangerous. Because if people realized their own divine nature, the entire power structure would collapse. So they did what empires always do. They edited the story. They removed the Gnostic Gospels. They burned the mystical teachings. They turned a master of consciousness into a sacrificial lamb. And they replaced the prayer of alignment with the prayer of supplication, the prayer that keeps you small, that keeps you begging, that keeps you convinced you need someone else to intercede. But fragments survived, whispered through secret lineages, hidden in symbols, encoded in texts the censors didn't understand. And now, in this age of uncovering, those fragments are surfacing again. Let me give you the structure, the anatomy of the prayer Jesus used before every act of power. First, withdrawal from the outer world. Jesus consistently went into solitude. This wasn't ritual, it was necessity, because the outer world is the domain of the Archons, the kingdom of distraction, noise, and illusion. To access true power, you must first step out of their frequency. You must go into the inner temple, the place the demiurge cannot reach, the throne room of your own divine spark. Second, alignment with the Pleroma. This is where most people fail. They try to pray while still identified with the ego, with the small self, with fear and lack and separation. But Jesus didn't pray as a man. He prayed as a son of the monad. He aligned his consciousness with the infinite. He remembered that he was not separate from the source, that his words were the logos itself, that his breath was the breath of creation. This alignment is everything. Without it, you're just speaking into the void. With it, you're weaving reality. Third, the invocation of the sacred name. Every tradition has a name for the unnameable, a sound that represents the infinite. For Jesus, it was rooted in the Hebrew mysteries, the Yod, He, Vav, He, the name that was never to be spoken casually, because to speak it was to invoke the presence of the divine, not as something external, but as the ground of your own being. When Jesus prayed, he didn't call on a distant God. He vibrated the name that dissolved all distance. He spoke the frequency that collapsed separation. And in that moment, there was no Jesus and God. There was only the one. Fourth, the declaration from knowing. This is the part the translations obscure. When Jesus said, "Lazarus, come forth," that wasn't a request. It wasn't hope. It was a command issued from the place of absolute certainty. A declaration spoken by someone who knew beyond doubt that life and death are illusions, that consciousness is eternal, that the body is a garment the spirit wears. And when you speak from that knowing, reality has no choice but to comply, because you're not imposing your will on the universe, you're speaking as the universe. Fifth, gratitude before the fact. Before the miracle manifested, Jesus gave thanks, not for what might happen, for what already was. In the realm of the Pleroma, all possibilities exist simultaneously: healing and sickness, life and death, abundance and lack. They're all present in the field of potential, and the one who gives thanks before seeing the result is choosing which reality to collapse into form. This is quantum mysticism disguised as prayer. This is the technology of manifestation the ancients knew, and it works not because you're manipulating reality, but because you're remembering you are reality. Are you beginning to see, Seeker? This wasn't magic. It was mastery. Not over others, over the illusion of separation, over the belief that you are small, over the lie that divinity is somewhere else. Jesus didn't have power because he was the only Son of God. He had power because he remembered he was an emanation of the monad. And so are you. Now let's talk about why this was suppressed. Because it wasn't just theological disagreement, it was war. A war for human consciousness. The demiurge, the false god of this material realm, knows one thing above all else, that if humanity awakens to its divine nature, his game ends. His Archonic servants lose their grip. His carefully constructed matrix of fear and control dissolves. So he works through institutions, through dogma, through anyone who claims that power belongs to someone else, that you need a priest to reach God, that you need a church to be saved, that you need to confess your sins to an intermediary, all of it designed to keep you from the one truth that liberates. You are already divine. You are already whole. You are already connected to the source, and the moment you remember how to pray from that place, you become ungovernable. This is why the Gnostic texts were buried, why the councils of Nicaea removed entire books, why mystics were burned as heretics, not because they were wrong, but because they were right, and their rightness threatened the empire. So how do you pray like Jesus? How do you access this forbidden technology? Not by repeating words, not by following rituals, but by doing what he did. Step 1. Enter the silence. Remove yourself from the noise of the world, from the voices that tell you who you are, from the identities that keep you trapped in the small self. Go inward, into the still point, into the place where the divine spark within you remembers its origin. Step 2. Recognize your unity with the source, not as belief, as direct knowing. Feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the space between your thoughts. You are not separate from the monad. You are an expression of it, a wave in the infinite ocean, and the ocean's power is your power. Step 3. Speak from that place, not from hope, not from need, from certainty, from the throne of your own divinity. Let your words be declarations, not requests. Let your voice carry the frequency of creation. Let your intention be so clear that doubt cannot enter. Step 4. Release attachment to the outcome. This is the paradox. You speak with absolute certainty, and then you let go, because the one who is attached is still operating from separation, still believing that you need to control the result. But the one who knows that the word has already accomplished what it was sent to do. The Logos does not fail. It cannot. It is the fabric of reality itself. Step 5. Give thanks, not when you see the result, before. Because in the realm beyond time, it is already done. And your gratitude is not for a future event. It's for the eternal truth that is always present. Always whole, always perfect. This, Seeker, is the prayer Jesus used, not a formula, a state, a return, a remembering. And once you step into it, the world you thought was solid begins to shimmer. The laws you thought were fixed begin to bend. The limitations you thought were real begin to dissolve. Because you're no longer speaking to reality. You're speaking as reality. If this transmission is landing in your soul, if something ancient within you is stirring, then do not let this moment pass. Subscribe, to the Gnostic archive. Share this with those who are ready, because the awakening is not a solo journey, it's a collective remembering, and every seeker who steps into their sovereignty adds light to the field. Let's go even deeper now, because there's a layer beneath the layer, a secret within the secret. The prayer Jesus used wasn't just for miracles, it was for protection. From what? From the Archons, the rulers of this world, the beings that feed on fear, doubt, and ignorance. They cannot touch the one who knows, cannot deceive the one who sees, cannot control the one who speaks from the Pleroma. This is why Jesus walked unharmed through hostile crowds, why he stood before Pilate without fear, why even in his darkest hour, he remained sovereign. He was operating from a frequency the Archons could not reach, a dimension where their power does not exist. And when you pray from that place, you step into the same protection. The Nag Hammadi texts speak of this. They speak of the seal of the living, a spiritual imprint that marks those who have awakened. The Archons can see this seal, and they recoil, because it reminds them of what they have lost, of the Pleroma they were exiled from, of the light they can never extinguish. And the one who carries this seal walks through the world untouched by its darkness, not because they are separate from it, but because they have transmuted it. This is the ultimate gnosis, seeker, that the world is not your enemy. The Demiurge is not all-powerful. The Archons are not invincible. They are echoes of a fallen emanation, fragments of Sophia's sorrow. And they hold power only over those who believe in separation. But the one who remembers, the one who prays as Jesus prayed, becomes a beacon, a living reminder that the prison has no walls, that the chains are illusions, that the fall was never final, and the return is always possible. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine a world where millions of people remembered this, where the prayer of alignment became the default, where humanity stopped begging and started creating, where the divine spark within each person ignited. What would happen to the structures built on fear, to the institutions that profit from ignorance, to the systems that require your submission? They would crumble, not through violence, not through revolution, through obsolescence, because a sovereign being has no use for masters. A conscious creator has no use for saviors. An awakened soul has no use for lies. This is why they stopped teaching the prayer. This is why the Gnostic texts were buried. This is why the mystical lineages were hunted, not to destroy knowledge, but to delay the awakening, to buy time for the Archonic systems to entrench themselves. But time is up. The seals are breaking, the texts are surfacing, and the ones who remember are gathering. You are one of them, seeker, or you wouldn't be here, or you wouldn't have made it this far, or you wouldn't feel the resonance in your chest as these words land. Something in you knows, has always known, and now it's time to stop pretending you don't. So here's your practice, not a ritual, a transmission. Go into silence each day, even if just for moments. Remove yourself from the outer noise, from the voices, from the identities, and in that silence, remember that you are not the body, not the name, not the story. You are the divine spark, the emanation of the monad, the logos made flesh. And from that remembering, speak. Speak to your health, speak to your circumstances, speak to the reality you want to inhabit, not from hope, from knowing, not from lack, from fullness, not from separation, from union, and watch what happens, not overnight, not in fireworks, but in subtle shifts, in synchronicities, in doors opening, in obstacles dissolving, in a reality that begins to reflect your inner state. this is the prayer Jesus used. This is the technology they suppressed. This is the gnosis that sets you free. And it has been waiting for you, waiting through lifetimes, through the long night of forgetting, through the ages of control and deception, waiting for this moment when you would finally remember. The monad does not speak in commandments. It whispers in recognition. It calls you home, not through fear, but through love. The love that knows you were never separate. That the fall was a dream. That the return is not a journey, but a shift in perception. And the prayer is the key to that shift. The sonic vibration that unlocks the door. The frequency that dissolves the veil. The word that was in the beginning and remains in you now. So speak, seeker. Speak as Jesus spoke, not to a distant God, but as the God that lives within, not in supplication, but in sovereignty, not in doubt, but in the certainty of one who knows, because you are not what they told you. You are not fallen, not broken, not separate. You are divine. You are eternal. You are the Pleroma experiencing itself through flesh. And when you remember that, when you pray from that place, miracles are not the exception. They are the natural order. They are what happens when consciousness remembers its power, when the divine spark ignites, when the prayer that was forgotten is spoken again. This has been the Gnostic Archive, a sanctuary for those who seek beyond the veil, for those who refuse the lies, for those who remember. If this transmission awakened something within you, if you felt the ancient current moving through these words, then do not walk this path alone. Subscribe, join the gathering. Become part of the lineage that refuses to forget. Because the next episode is already prepared. Another secret is waiting to be unsealed. Another fragment of the original Gnosis is ready to surface. And you are invited, not as a follower, but as a fellow initiate, as one who carries the seal of the living, as a seeker who has become a knower. The prayer is yours now. Use it, speak it, become it, and watch as the world you thought was solid begins to dream itself anew, until we meet again in the sanctuary. Remember who you are, remember where you came from, and remember the prayer that moves mountains, the prayer Jesus used, the prayer they stopped teaching, the prayer that is your birthright. Go now, and speak creation into being.